Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here on INC Live for the UFC 293 preview show. My name is Karl Bainbridge and I am joined by the man on the right hand side of my screen. He is the Peyton Royce to my BDK. He's my friend and yours. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, and I'm very, very happy to be the Trent Beretta to your Chuck Taylor, the best friends in AEW. Congrats on them winning at Wembley.
What was it, like 86,000 people or something like that?
They broke the WrestleMania 32 record. It's technically the biggest attendance for a wrestling event ever, I think they said, which is phenomenal. I watched that card late. Really good, actually. But I'm glad that Peyton Royce won. I had a big thing for her back in the day. I will gladly take Peyton Royce.
Yeah, I needed to think of some kind of Australian double act. So of course for the Iconics. So I don't know whether or not you agree with that one, Joe.
I like this. Yeah, I should have done Aussie Open. Honestly, they're a tag team right now.
They certainly are. Yes. We're making all these sort of Australian references though because we are back in Australia for UFC 293. Ironically enough, UFC 193 also taking place in Australia. Scale of this one though is a little bit smaller. We are at the Sydney Quad Bank Arena, which I believe hosted the boxing events for the 2000 Olympics. You can tell I've been doing my research here at INC Live. And I have to say, Joe, we often talk about this when it comes to these international shows. Obviously, over the past few months, we've been to Singapore. We had the London card, which was in July, and the pay-per-view, which was UFC 286. And we often seem to go along the same sort of issues when it comes to these cards, which is you'll get a title fight, maybe a marquee co-main, and then the rest of the card, you're scrimping a lot. And I understand that a lot of American-based fighters don't want to travel thousands of miles over to Australia to compete. But I feel more than ever, this is probably one of the most extreme examples of the UFC sort of cashing in on the one big main event fighter and just not caring about the rest.
Yeah, this card was it's not as stacked. Lacks a lot of consequence. Something we've said a couple times before. Like what constitutes a bad card is bad matchups play a part into it, but a lack of consequence is another sign of it. And there's no way to know if this is a bad card or not yet, obviously. But it definitely doesn't have the name value and high stakes that you want from your $89 or $80, however much it is now.
So that's the thing that throws me off, because I'm seeing a couple of fights on the main card which I wouldn't be willing to pay money to watch. And that's no offense to the fighters themselves. I'm just thinking, what are the relevant, important fights that make me want to pay money to tune in?
I remember, I think it was in the FU Canada card. Where a fight that was actually very good was the Mike Malott fight. And I love how they pitched it beforehand as they're coming out, because it was the incredibly odd duck on the card if you look at it, and they claimed it was part of Dana White's new idea, if you know, like if you know, or if you don't know, now you know, kind of thing, where it's like, we're giving opportunities to these up and coming guys, so now you know who they are. Okay, sure, but why not do that on the prelims?
Yes. And it's almost as if the framing it almost as if Dana is doing us a favour by giving these lackluster fights main card pedestals.
Yeah, and it's like, you're welcome for paying a lot of money for this card. Hold on, that's not how this works, kind of thing. It's very typical of the man, I'll say. I'll leave it at that.
Yes, the UFC are going to be under a lot of lawsuits over the next couple of months. We don't want to get ourselves involved in one ourselves.
Yeah, I don't do good under pressure in court. That's all I'll say. I'll spill the beans on this whole operation.
The one thing that does give us cause for optimism, though, is that yes, 293 doesn't seem like it's going to be the best card of all time. However, tradition normally says that the UFC usually put their eggs into the final quarter of the year. So in October, we're going to be back in Abu Dhabi. A lot of big names have been announced for that one. 295, we've got Madison Square Garden. And the UFC did like to try and make a big deal about the December card. There's potential rumours that could be Conor, or another big title fight, potentially O'Malley's first offence. So the UFC, they are maybe scrimping a little bit now, but you expect them to go full pelt between October and December.
Yeah, I mean, because the next card, the last two fights on that card look fantastic to me. You know, I mean, who doesn't want to see Charles rematch Islam after the performance? Poor Benny, but the performance he put on against Benny. So, you know, that one's exciting. I'm sure I'll talk about it more when we get to November. But I've recently been getting into religion lately, praying and hoping for the return of Stone Cold Stipe to not just beat but put John Jones out. Like that would make my year if that happened. But obviously, you know, other good fights on there. I think I think they announced Mackenzie Dern's going to be on that card.
Yeah, versus Andrade.
All right, sounds like a good one actually.
Like that would be a stylistic nightmare for Dern a few years ago. But with the way Andrade has been fighting recently, you wouldn't rule out Mackenzie getting the win.
Yeah, and Mackenzie's, you know, she's been like improving and stuff like that better. You know, her becoming single seemed to have done wonders for her now, and because it's done wonders for my confidence because I'm assuming she's going to call back any second. But no, I Mackenzie Dern is I think she's really improved legitimately, all jokes aside, and I think I'm kind of curious how that fight's gonna go because I would love to see a return of the Jessica Andrade, honestly.
Yeah,
that also sounds fun to me.
That's been one of the sort of like sub stories of the year. Like when people will look back on 2023, I think one of the sort of things that stick in my mind is just what a bad year Jessica Andrade has had. Like bearing in mind how she started the year, like pretty much dismantled Lauren Murphy, and it's just been downhill since.
Oh yeah, her getting KO'd in the first round, and then I think Blanchfield got her in the first round too, but that was like 10-day short notice thing. So there is some forgiveness there, I suppose. But no, like Zhang Xiaonan is who put her out in the first round, right? Like her last fight. Just man, you know what do you do?
We are doing everything but trying to talk about this card.
Is it working?
We are here to talk about UFC 293. As you can tell, it's not the most star-studded card of all time, but we'll try and persevere, get ourselves a show, and maybe we might have a bonus preview show coming up on the channel in a couple of days' time. I will leave that there until the end of the program. For now, though, we are going to be talking about the prelims. You can see those on our screen right now. And obviously, being in Australia, you can expect a lot of Australian talent there and a lot of city kickboxing.
Yes. There's two guys on this prelims card that I have picked out, and one of them I was like, wow, he's still in the UFC. But I thought I heard he got cut legitimately, and the other guy, he's pretty good. He's not bad actually. And two city kickboxing guys that are really hyped up.
I'm going to take a guess on the first one of these, and I'm going to believe it's our prelim headliner. Carlos Ulberg entered the UFC. Largely, arguably, he was more noted for the way he looked rather than his actual fighting skill. He lost his UFC debut, which was a wild war against Kennedy and Chenzaku. Since then, he is on a 4-fight winning streak, and he's taking on a guy I personally think is very entertaining to watch, Da Un Jung. So I think we could have potentially a fun matchup here.
I think that one actually sounds really fun. Yeah, I sadly always remember him for the loss to Kennedy, but that fight's awesome, actually, though. But he actually is good. He just kind of gassed out trying to put him away. He's pretty solid. He has a bad habit of keeping his hands low at times, but no, he's got great power, great finishing ability, a pretty solid striker. You know, he's city kickboxing, so kind of makes sense. You know, and so that fight should be pretty good, I think. Yep. Hopefully.
And from Jun's perspective, it's a chance for him to try and get back to winning ways. He was on a great run of form. I think he won like 10, 11 fight unbeaten streak. He's dropped his last two, including a loss to Devin Clark, who Devin Clarked him. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I think high stakes for both guys in there, because if Ulberg wins, he's on the verge of a top 15 place, possibly.
Yeah, had to put him against Jamal Hill next. No, just kidding. Don't do that. But yeah, yeah. I forgot. Jung, he got the win. He beat Kennedy in Juku, or I always butcher his name. How do you say it one more time?
And Chenzaku.
In Shinjuku. My brain, you know what's funny? I can say Injikawani perfectly, like the Chidi and Anthony Injikawani, but this one always gives me a problem. But yeah, he finished him in the first round with elbows. It was awesome. And I was like, oh, this is the guy to watch. And then next thing I know, I heard he's just losing. So I would love to get back to his winning ways because he's very fun. But yeah, I mean, I think if Olberg wins, he's probably knocking on the door. Oh man, him and Khalil Roundtree could be fun.
Ooh.
Oh, right. Oh.
Jacoby.
Yeah,
Olberg versus Jacoby, that would be a good one as well.
I really like Dustin Jacoby. I really like him for some reason. I can't tell you why, but he is awesome to watch for me. He is one of my boys currently. He has earned that stable spot for sure. And that fight would be fantastic too.
And I think we're going to be talking about the second city kickboxing fighter on the prelims as well. Is this last chance saloon for Blood Diamond?
I didn't know he got a third chance. I feel like I'm being mean here. I thought I heard he got cut. So I don't know if they re-signed him for this event. I saw that he had dropped the 2 straight, so it wasn't like he won in like the middle. So, but I guess they're keeping him. I was very unimpressed with his last fight, and in the first fight, you know, he got taken down, submitted. You know, he was known as a striker coming into the UFC, so it does kind of make sense that what happened to him is similar to what I ironically thought would happen to Alex Bejeda in a sense. So I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see what his second fight is like. And I wasn't really that impressed, so this has to be the last chance. And no matter how much the UFC likes you, the UFC really likes city kickboxing. They have a very, very good relationship with that gym and that camp. You know, they seem to love that whole team. I would be very surprised if they kept him around if he goes 3-3, drops this next fight because of that. They'll probably tell him to go get more experience and then come back, you know. So if he doesn't make it here, I think he probably could make another comeback to the UFC, but it seems like the last chance of this run.
Anybody else on the prelims that takes your interest?
2 guys that I think feels like the fight of who is the bigger boy, Jamie Malarkey and
My
John
boy.
McDessie. Yeah.
He's in my stable, Jimmy Malarkey. Because he always looks sad.
Awesome.
He's always got these really sad eyes.
He fights like, I feel mean saying this. He fights a little sad too because like I for some reason I think of him as like just doing this like a little scared and kind of like depressed, and then he'll just like, you know, throw like a whopping bomb on a guy and like rock him and stun him. Like his fight with Michael Johnson earlier this year was awesome. Like that's one of those just fights that gets swept under the rug. Don't let everyone forgets how awesome it is. But that fight's awesome. And John McDessie I've liked for a very long time. So he's very much past his prime, but he's always been like a boy for me, you know, kind of thing. Remember his lead spinning elbow or spinning back fist. He did it with his lead hand, which I had never seen before in a real fight. And I was like, oh, that's insane. It was so cool. I think it was against Kyle Watson, who was a tough castmate at one point. But so I'm actually kind of excited for this fight. So, because you know they're gonna fight. They're fighting to get into somebody's stable. You just know that, and it's kind of exciting seeing it unfold in front of your eyes.
Speaking of tough, are you interested in Landon Quinones, who appeared on Tough 31, was actually eliminated in the first round, yet he's accepted a short notice call to fight Nasrat Hakparast?
Who did he? Is 31 this last season?
31, yes. It was the veterans versus prospects.
And he was on the prospect side. I admittingly would like, okay, yeah, he lost. He's the guy who Jason Knight beat in the first round. Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious how that's going to go because, I mean, he's got a lot of KOs on his record. You know, he's a finisher for sure. And I could see him getting kind of controlled and beaten up on the ground a little bit. But man, if he pulls it off, I'd be really impressed, especially with some of the allegations that have come out lately about the last season of Tough.
Hmm.
Kurt Hollabaugh, the winner for the lightweights, he recently said, I think it was like a couple hours ago, maybe that's when I saw it, was he said that Team Connor, they had to skip like a ton of training camp because he just wouldn't show up half the time. And it's like, oh my God, if that happened, those guys are really just fed to the wolves to deal with it. Like, so I kind of want to root for him because of that. Like, hey, I got kind of screwed over on the show because of who picked me to be on his team. Maybe I can, do it the old-fashioned way.
This might be the UFC's way of saying sorry.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
We're going to see all those prospects come in if that happens.
Yeah. So before we move on to the first fight on the main card as well, a shout out to Kiefer Crosby, former Bellator veteran. He's making his debut on short notice up against a guy called Kevin Uset. I bring this up because there was a real sort of Irish invasion that Bellator had when they had like James Gallagher, Liam McCourt all coming into the promotion. A lot of people believe that the UFC are planning for an event in Dublin next year with Ian Gary main eventing, and Kiefer Crosby being signed to the UFC could fill that void as well.
He just came off a win against, is that who I think it is? Yeah, he just beat Dirty Cowboy on the regionals. Wow. UFC veteran Dirty Cowboy.
Yep.
Cowboy
Oliveira, we should point that out.
Yeah. Alex Oliveira. He's Dirty Cowboy. There's Donald Cerrone, Cowboy. Then there's Dirty Cowboy, as I call him, because he's cheated and he's attempted to cheat in every fight. He tried fish hooking and eye gouging Gunnar Nelson, if I remember correctly.
And then
tries it in every fight.
Gunnar hammered him in elbows and got revenge.
Yeah, that fight's actually really good. That fight's really good too.
231 in general is a great card. Like, I think we
no
put
one
it up
talks
as
about
one of
it.
the retro reviews and nobody chose it.
Nobody talks about how good that card is. It's there's like that's what I love about the retro reviews, self-insert, self-promotion here.
Please watch them.
No, we don't get a lot of views on them compared to the other, types of videos on the channel. And I would like it more people watched it, but I'm gonna keep putting out the same level of quality content that I like to do because I have a blast doing it. I got to rewatch my own uncut raw footage this week for a retro review coming up, and it's probably wrong to admit you laugh at your own jokes and mistakes, but I was laughing at my own bloopers really hard. It was really funny to me. But yeah, like getting to like talk about cards no one like talks about, or getting to my hidden hammers is like a thing I do now where it's like, oh, these guys who are no one talks about anymore, but they had like crazy awesome fun careers. Chris Lytle is probably the poster boy for that stable, and like getting to talk about stuff like that, like, oh, no one remembers how good that fight is at 231. That card is really good. No one wants to talk about how good it is.
Like Jimmy Manuwa versus Thiago Santos. That's a war.
It's awesome. It is like, it's basically two guys in glass armor swinging sledgehammers at each other. And how is that not exciting? Like, it's fantastic.
Well, speaking of the light heavyweight division, that's where we're going for our first fight. And it's Tyson Pedro who will be taking on Sweden's Anton Turkalj in our opening bout. Pedro comes in at a -150 favourite. You can get Turkalj in at +120. Now, we've all made quite rough predictions over the years when it comes to MMA. And one of the worst that I made, now I have to admit this was back in 2017, 2018. I said Tyson Pedro would be a top 5 light heavyweight. Now, is this a guy who failed to live up to his potential, or a career which was hurt by injuries?
I think it's more injuries, and I still think he has his age is it's like in the 30s, which honestly that's totally fine at 205 and heavyweight, right? That's my opinion. It's like the lower weight classes where like there's that 35 curse. But his fight age isn't that bad. Like he isn't like, he doesn't have like all the years of wars on him. Like one of my favorites ever, Shogun Rua. He's not even 40 yet, but he's really like 90 in like fight years. Um, so I mean, I think he still could be eventually like top 10. I think he's got a lot of upside personally, but I don't know. I think it's mostly injuries, like time off. Like because it seemed like for a while he was getting as close as he could to beating guys and then randomly getting finished. Like I
Yes.
remember that's how what happened at the Shogun fight.
OSP
But
as well.
yeah,
Because he
OSP did
had
finish him.
OSP badly rocked, and then OSP managed to pull it back on the ground.
Yeah. I think that he can probably put it all together. I mean, like he lost his last fight to Modestas Bukauskas. Always butcher that name too. That's one. That's his name's fun to say though. I love his first name.
Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, like I mean, that guy's super underrated and super solid. He was only cut because he was like, oh, my knee is destroyed from this Khalil Roundtree kick. You know, he wasn't cut because of how he was fighting bad. You know, and he just got caught with a totally legitimate kick, in my opinion. You know, it's the same way as getting like kicked in the face or landed like getting hit with like a haymaker. It just hit you in the leg, you know, kind of thing. But that guy's super underrated and super solid, so that guy's probably going to be top 15, I would imagine soon. And so I don't know. I think he could probably ink his way back,
Yep.
though. I think he's still got time on the clock.
And some notable wins as well on Pedro's resume already. So he's got wins over Khalil Roundtree in his UFC debut, Paul Craig, Saparbeg Safarov, and the greatest fighter of all time, Harry Hunsucker.
I knew you were going to bring it up. I had it loaded ready if you weren't going to bring it up. Yeah, Harry Hunsucker. You know, I will never forget us on the prelim show. Like we refuse to disappoint the Harry Hunsucker fans out there.
It was actually one of the hardest challenges I've done with that preview show, was to try and sort of like say, look, you never know, Harry Hunsucker might have a shot at this. If he's going to win, this is how it's going to happen.
We actually did a really good job. I think, not to pat ourselves in the back too hard because I don't want to break my arm trying to do it, but I thought we did a pretty good job. We were both like, oh, we actually pulled it off. Wow. And but I mean, yeah, I think I think the UFC likes him. I think they see upside in him, and so I think they're doing a pretty good job making him the opener and taking on a guy that's lost two in a row.
It's a winnable
Like,
fight. It's definitely a winnable fight for Pedro. So
it's a fight that he can finish too.
So we'll talk a little bit about Turkali here. 8-2 record. As mentioned before, so he got in through the Contender Series. He was also a veteran in the promotion Brave. Went 3-0 there. Beat some pretty good competition in the process. But of course, he's got into the UFC. He's dropped 2 in a row. He Vitor Petrino, who was unbeaten going into that fight, and Gielton Almeida. Do you want to have a guess on how Gielton won that fight?
I'm guessing he snap kicked him or push kick into a double leg. I'm guessing. You know.
Same thing every time.
On one hand, you have to respect it because it's like, well, if you can't stop it, but on the other hand, it makes you go, like, what else can you do? Like, what happens if like someone just says, nah, that's not working?
Like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people have a go at me for sort of like clowning Gielton for this. Like, I want to stress, look, Gielton seems like a lovely bloke based on what I've seen on social media.
Yeah.
And my frustration isn't with him. My frustration is with the heavyweight division being completely unable to deal with the most telegraphed fighting style in the UFC.
It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. He's done it in every fight at the beginning of every round. And like he did it to Rosenstruck, and I think he has Curtis Blades next.
Now that's interesting. I am really looking forward to that because I think Curtis Blades can stop that teep kick to double leg.
I gotta be honest. This is a meme that I want to continue for the next like couple years. Like, what if he's the guy who beats John Jones with like a teep kick and a double leg? Like, it's like Tom Aspinall, Jailton Almeida. He beat Tom Aspinall with a teep kick and a double leg, dude. Like, this is the greatest fighter ever with like this unbeatable strategy. Like, and then we see like this meta of MMA come in where Oh my God, Brandon Moreno has really reinvented himself. He's really utilizing the teep kick into double leg for his fifth fight with Alexander Pantoja. Like, I think this sounds. I think that I want this to live on forever. I'm predicting him to lose, for the record, but I can dream, can I? It just sounds hilarious, you know.
So where do you stand on Takali based off the fights you've seen of him so far?
He. I hate being this way. He comes across as contender series filler. You know, like that's like a big critique I have of the contender series, where it feels like they're just using it to pump out fighters they can pay for 7-7, and they can get them on a 7-7 contract, and then use them to kind of fill spots when they need it. And that's kind of the vibe I get with him. I mean, his two losses are to guys that are very, or like one, you know, we just got done making fun of him, but Almeida is very good. At least seems like it in heavyweight. But like Vitor Petrino was unbeaten going into the fight. You can kind of cut him some slack. I mostly remember the Almeida fight, and it's kind of hard to look good against him, admittingly. But I mean, he's got decent wins on the regional scene. He has a 13-second spinning back fist KO. So, you know, he seems like he's much more capable on the feet in terms of like that to his ground game. So if we could have a really fun striking battle here, because Tyson Pedro primarily a kickboxer, with just thunderous kicks. So kind of seeing like I think that European kind of style of kickboxing that with like some submission training. I always think of what's his name? Chas Skelly from back in the day.
Now there's a throwback. There's a hidden hammer.
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorites ever. And had the fastest submission win in UFC history for a while. And but yeah, I like it kind of reminds me of that kind of style. I think probably because they're both from the same country. It could be just me being, you know, American and dumb, but I think this could be a pretty decent little opener that I'm somehow paying money for.
Yeah. From what I've seen from Takali, one thing I will say is it's worth checking out the Petrino fight, because that was on that weird card where it was sort of an Apex card, but it wasn't at the Apex because they were doing Power Slap. They had a small casino in Vegas. It was actually a really good atmosphere, I thought. That to me is what the Apex cards should be like. And
it was on this card. Yeah, that card's awesome.
Yep, and Takali fights Petrino, and that's actually a really underrated fight. A lot of momentum shifts. I do think the judges made the right call. I think Petrino did enough to win it. A couple of things that stood out for me when it came to Takali is when it comes to fighting on the ground, I actually think his ground abilities are okay. The problem is I feel it takes a long time for him to calculate what he's going to do. So he's like, okay, I'm on the ground. I can see that his arm's there. I'm going to maybe think, should I maybe looking to try and go for an armbar there? And by the time he's done that, Petrino's exploded out and reverse position. So I think his decision making on the ground, he's slow to react to sort of like the explosivity of his opponent sometimes. And I also think as well that he is very gangly. I can't see him ever getting down to 185. No. But he did seem he wasn't as robust as what Petrino did. So I think maybe trying to bulk up a little bit might be something to maybe work towards, because Pedro's stacked for this weight class.
He is just like a little tank. He has got, you know, when you talk about the look, that guy's got a look, you know, very big dude.
Yeah. And it's interesting you brought up that you thought that Pedro's main base was kickboxing. I actually think he's more effective as a grappler.
Yeah. I feel like he just doesn't do it enough. I feel like we mostly see him just start blasting away with kicks. Like, at least recently, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
He just wants to, like, let it rip with the, as I've now coined it in my head mentally, that blunt force trauma, kind of style of kicking. You know? Like, maybe it's the Harry Hunsucker fight. and where he just kicked a hole in his stomach as hard as he could. That was pretty awesome, honestly. Um, and I'm also very biased towards kicking. So
Yeah. I mean, he submitted Safarov. I think it was a Kimura, I think. So any guy who
wow.
manages to submit a Russian grappler, I think that deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah.
I think he got Paul Craig in a crucifix and just hammered elbows to him.
Yeah.
So I think the issue isn't so much that Pedro is bad on the ground. I think his issue is trying to get his opponents there. It's one of the same problems I feel Mackenzie Dern has. Like, we know Dern's an amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner, but the wrestling isn't up to scratch.
I just thought of a pretty good comparison to this, actually. I'm not comparing him 100% to this, but he kind of reminds me of Carlos Condit in a way. Whereas, like, Carlos Condit was a very good grappler and a very good striker. He had no wrestling, though. And so that led into problems when a guy could just pick him up and fling him, you know? And because I remember Ilir Latifi just kind of grinding on him for like 3 rounds, and OSP got him down. It's like I feel like I wonder if his like weakness is guys who can like have a good solid wrestling base. And that's kind of interesting to think about.
Sturdy.
Yeah, yeah, but Bukesk is a sturdy dude. It's a good way to put it, honestly.
Well, like
He's a bigger guy.
Latifi's the tank. Shogun was always known for how durable he was. So, and those are two guys that managed to sort of survive the Pedro onslaught and ended up coming in with the win.
Yeah. And him getting a win on the ground against Paul Craig is big because Paul Craig, if I really wish we had the Ankalaev and Ryan Spann fight just because of your opinion on that.
In what way?
That Paul Craig was both their dads.
Oh yeah, Ankalaev versus Jamal Hill.
Yeah. Oh, Jamal Hill. Who did I say? That's what I meant.
Ryan Spann.
Oh, it's because I was thinking of Nikita Krylov earlier today. I missed that guy.
As every normal male does.
Yeah, like he's a boy. He's in my boy stable. All right, I thought of my boy stable today when I was looking at this card.
Yeah. Who are you picking to win this one?
I'm expecting a Tyson Pedro finish. Anton has not been finished by strikes. That said, I feel like Pedro's pretty quick for this weight class. The Villanueva fight and the Harry Hunsucker fight, have to stress, not the best competition at all, except Harry Hunsucker. But Villanueva is not like the best competition, but he came across really quick, really powerful and dynamic there, and his resume is very underrated, honestly. And if you look at the 4 guys that beat him, the Shogun one, you can just say he got caught. OSP was something at that time. He was kind of in that gatekeepery role. Ilir Latifi was always a gatekeeper, but a very good one. And Bukauskas is just super underrated, I think. So I think like his resume speaks more volumes to me. So I'm expecting a finish late first round, maybe early second round.
I'm going to be picking Pedro to win this one as well. I think he seems a lot more dynamic, and I can see more ways for him to win the fight. I think if Takali is going to win, it's going to be standing, and I don't think that Pedro has sort of like the durability concerns to make me think Takali's going to do it that way. Where I do have some question marks, though, is all of Tyson Pedro's finishes have come in the first round. If it does go into the second and third, does he start to feel that pressure of, oh God, he's not going away yet? So I do have some concerns about that, but I am picking Pedro to win this one, and I'm going to say second round.
Okay. Yeah. He's fighting a pretty durable guy from what I remember, and so it could be a case of, like just dominating, losing momentum, and then we go to the scorecards. Where it's kind of a closer fight than it should have been kind of scenario, because his cardio is always a question for me, admittingly, but I question cardio at 205 and heavyweight. I'm very critical of the cardio at those weight classes.
You're going to have a lot of fun with this next fight then, because we're going up to the heavyweight division, and it's a rematch which is taking place here as Justin Tafa takes on Austin Lane. Betting odds for this one, you can get Tafa at -230. Austin Lane comes in at +190. Now, this is a rematch which took place at UFC Jacksonville. You might not remember that one because it only lasted 30 seconds. Justin Tafa suffered a brutal eye poke. The referee had to wave off the bout. So the UFC, I feel, have done the right thing. They're rebooking this fight again, this time in Tafa's hometown of Australia. However, again, we sort of bring up the same question we had with Pedro versus Takali. Is it a fight that should be on a pay-per-view main card where people are paying $80 for it?
No. I don't. No, I don't think so at all. I have a really hard time trying to justify it in my head, admittingly. Like, if I were to play devil's advocate and say yes, then I feel like I'd be lying and not a liar. I mean, this is like he's a contender. Like, Austin Lane is a contender series guy. Justin Tafa has been on the main card of UFC fights before. You usually put him out there, like in the Parker Porter fight. You usually put him out there to go out and, hey, get a really quick finish, get a knockout, or you run the risk of him losing a not very good fight by decision. But you typically put him out there so he can KO someone really quick. And then, okay, see, we got you your daily dose of violence, guys. All right, now to the rest of the card kind of thing. So, like, I kind of understand it being here, but when you usually want to put him, in my opinion, on a card that's pretty good, but you just want that heavyweight kind of action on there. If someone's craving it for some reason. I don't know. I mean, the eye poke was pretty bad, and I could see that making this fight pretty good, you know, kind of lighting a fire under him, making him mad. And you know, Tafa isn't the biggest guy, if I remember right. He's kind of a shorter guy, if I remember right. I mean, he comes in underweight. He's 6 foot at heavyweight, which isn't huge. He also has missed the heavyweight limit, which is always very exciting.
He's the only fighter in UFC history to miss the heavyweight limit.
Yeah. I always think of Tim Sylvia because he missed it in another promotion, but, you know. But he's fighting a guy who is a monster. And I was like, what did this guy ever do? I remember looking this up when I was doing research going, did this guy play any other sports? There's no way he's 35 and this big and isn't like a transfer from another sport. Yeah, he played American football. He was in the NFL for a little bit.
I think for the Jacksonville Jags.
Yeah, played for Tony Khan in AEW, the Khan family. He probably fought CM Punk on the way out, knowing how that usually goes.
Well, Punk fights anyone these days.
Yeah, he fought Luke Perry's son Sunday. Get out of here. It was DoorDash trying to give me an offer because I'm a heavy man, but yeah, I don't know. He's a big dude and he has a very interesting look, and I got to be honest, I'm kind of rooting for him because I don't know. I mean, I like Justin Tafa, but I kind of want a new name in this division. Heavyweight needs love, right? Like I feel like I say this a lot. Heavyweight, middleweight, and 205 need a lot of love, and why can't Austin Lane be a new, you know, like something in the division maybe? At least something exciting, something new.
Something different, because I feel like when you have these unranked heavyweights, they all fall into a similar sort of like archetype in terms of like their physique and the way they fight. And I'm not going to say that Austin Lane's going to be like a future world champion or anything like that, but he's this tall, long, lanky striker compared to the sort of fat guy brawlers of like the Tafas, the Jake Colliers of the world. And I think that is something a little bit different. Where I'm interested when it comes to Austin Lane, though, is the journey he took to get into the UFC. Because if you do remember the name Austin Lane, he was the guy that Greg Hardy fought in his UFC debut. And he got blown out the water almost immediately. Hardy, of course, went on to series. Yep, Hardy, of course, went on to fight in the UFC, and we all know how his career played out. Lane, meanwhile, stayed on the regional scene, slowly started clawing his way back, eventually got another call to the Contender Series, and got into the big show around the same sort of time Greg Hardy was on his way out. So I just love that sort of juxtaposition of how both of their careers went.
One did it the right way, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like, because Austin Lane was brought in as a sacrificial lamb, another professional athlete, former professional athlete, coming in to a new sport, not that much experience, and was fed to the wolves. Because, admittingly, Greg Hardy, it's heavyweight. No one looks good at heavyweight, really, until you get to, like, the top three. Sad fact, for in my opinion, at least. And he was kind of just fed to that proverbial wolf as Greg Hardy looked relatively better and hit like a massive truck. He was a commodity that promotions wanted to sign because of his notoriety. They know fans are instantly not going to like the man because of his notoriety. And UFC historically doesn't care about that. And so they brought him in to, build him in. And here's Austin Lane, who worked hard, worked it all off, and got back the right way by improving and becoming a more well-rounded fighter. It's like you said, something exciting and unique, because I'm going to be honest. I swear, Andrei Arlovski has decisioned Chase Sherman 5 times. Like, I remember Chase Sherman and Jake Collier fought, and that was the first time I realized they're different people. So, like, I was really scared if they touched, like, the fabric of reality would shift inward, and then it's like, oh my God, you can't let these guys touch gloves. They can't let them fight. Like, they're gonna break reality, because I thought they were the same guy, and then it turns out no. Andrei Arlovski did fight both of those guys. That wasn't a rematch. Oh,
he beat both of them as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he beat both of them. I thought it was a rematch when I saw the second one. I was like, oh, yeah, he's rematching that guy he beat recently. No, they're two different people. It's very embarrassing for me to say that, because I, do the recaps, but totally blew my mind. Like, heavyweight has that kind of problem right now. I say it every paper, or like every previous show, that heavyweight needs help. Why can't it be Austin Lane be a little bit of that help? He's not going to be that world champion, but he's going to be something different and unique for fight nights. He's a 6'6", that guy that isn't a chonky boy, that has a very interesting story. I kind of want him to beat Justin Tafa here. As a fan, that's me. But as an analyst, I will spoil it. I don't know if that's happening.
I've got those question marks as well.
Justin Tafa hits so hard. He knocked out one of the greatest fighters ever, Harry Hunsucker, with a head kick he blocked. That's kind of impressive to me.
Yeah.
He hits so hard.
Yep, I have done a little bit of research on Tafa myself here. So 3-3 so far in the UFC. Now his wins come against the greatest fighter of all time, Harry Hunsucker. Also has wins over Parker Porter and Juan Adams, which I think all 3 were finished in the first round. His losses, Jared Vanderaa, Jorgen De Castro, which I believe was also a main card fighter on an Australia show. I think he came charging in and De Castro caught him with the uppercut. And we always talk about these underrated, unknown fights. Check out, even though Justin Tafa lost his fight, him versus Carlos Felipe on Fight Island is we often mock the sort of fat guy brawls. That is one of the good examples of a fat guy brawl. That is so much fun.
That was I forgot about that fight, and then when I saw it, I saw pictures of it, and I went, I guess I'm researching this fight. Why not? It's so good. It's very fun.
Yeah,
it's a very fun one.
As mentioned before, carries a ton of power. You can even see it. Like, a lot of people mocked Tafa for missing weight, but you can sort of understand why. I mean, you look at the size of his legs. This guy is built like a truck. Striking defense isn't great, but he makes up for it with his durability, as we saw with the Carlos Felipe fight. I am interested to see his takedown defense. It hasn't really been tested, and Lane being a defensive end, he has turned to wrestling time and again, so I'd be interested to see if that comes to fruition. The one thing I will say about Justin Tafa, though, he does carry a lot of power, but he's very one-note. He's a pocket fighter who fights at his opponent's pace. If Austin Lane turns up the pace, he'll try and keep up. If he wants to slow it down, he's okay to fight there. So, he's okay fighting on his opponent's terms. And bearing in mind that Austin Lane is a guy who's going to want to try and stay on the outside, use his reach to try and pick him apart, that could be a little bit concerning from Tafa's perspective. In terms of Austin Lane, I do have some concerns over not so much his durability, but if you look at the guys who've beaten Austin Lane in his career, powerhouses who blow him out, who just overwhelm him with power, and that's Justin Tafa to a T.
I think one thing, if I want to double check their reach advantages, because I just not thought about that. Because Austin Lane is significantly taller. Could, in theory, Austin Lane just keep him out of that range? Yeah, that's a big reach. That's a 6-inch reach advantage. But, man, you never know. I mean, because all the guy has to do is hit you.
Yeah.
You know, Justin Tafa hits very, very hard.
And the great Felicia Spencer said 6 inches doesn't impress her. That's what she said, not me.
Got me. That caught me off guard so hard. That's probably the hardest I've ever corpsed on the show, and I haven't technically laughed yet, but my face is hurting from trying not to. She's a great girl.
Yes.
That's all I got. Yeah, 6 inches doesn't impress her one bit, but it might impress Justin Tafa if he gets kept out of it. So,
I'm gonna get I'm getting the impression you're leaning towards Tafa to win this one.
Yeah, I feel like he's just a safer pick. You know, like I feel like it's. I mean, Austin Lane might be maybe more skilled, and Justin Tafa is not very skilled at all, but he technically does have they always say like a kickboxing acumen. I feel like that's just because people try to, relate him to Mark Hunt. But I don't know. I think it's just a little safe to see Tafa get that KO in the first round.
Yeah.
As a fan, I want to root for Austin Lane, but I'm picking Justin Tafa here.
I'd put it this way. I think that Austin Lane has more of an upside as a fighter. I could see somebody with his physique and his style making something happen. But at this point in time, he's just far too raw to sort of iron out some of the flaws in his game. And I think Tafa's going to exploit that. So I'm picking Justin Tafa to win this one by knockout. I'm going to say late in the first round.
Yeah, okay. I can see it. One thing too, Tafa lately, you mentioned his pace. He's been really content just to walk in and see what's going on and then kind of match it. I wouldn't be surprised because that's what led him to get the KO over Parker Porter. I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of how he gets it, just Austin Lane trying to come in, and because of the green and rawness of it, and it being a heavyweight fight as well, just not, leaving himself a little bit open and just getting clobbered by some random bomb from Tafa. But on the other side, maybe Austin Lane just double legs him. Oh my God, I got it. I think I know how Austin Lane wins this fight.
Team kick to double leg?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gilton Almeida has ruined MMA.
Oh my God, he figured out the code. It's like the Konami code of MMA. Yeah, I like this.
Only in heavyweight. Only at heavyweight.
I mean, you say that until Brandon Moreno gets his title back that way. Yeah.
Good thing you're talking about the flyweights, though, because we are talking about a flyweight bout. You saw what I was doing there. Great minds think
Mm-hmm.
alike, Joe. Yes,
Oh
we are
yeah.
talking about the flyweight division here. It's Manel Karp who is taking on a newcomer to the UFC in the form of Felipe Dos Santos. Now, Karp comes into this one at minus 340 favourite. You can get Dos Santos in at plus 280. Now, originally, this was supposed to be Karp taking on Kara France. Unfortunately, KKF has had to pull out with injury. Dos Santos steps in to take his place. Now, Dos Santos was originally supposed to be fighting on the Contender Series. His fight actually fell through, and the UFC still kept him on the books and have rewarded him with an opportunity to break into the flyweight top 10.
Well, you said you watched him in LFA. You said he's really fun.
He reminds me a lot of, well, he trains with Charles Oliveira, and I think you could see a lot of his fighting style in Dos Santos. So Charles, of course, likes to try and stay very upright, throw up the teep kicks, quite high guard, sort of like that sort of Muay Thai knee coming up. I would say he's a little bit more aggressive than what Charles is, which you can kind of sort of get away with at flyweight, because obviously you don't have that sort of power in the same way that the lightweights and the welterweights do.
Yeah.
With that though, he is still a little bit reckless, but he is very
Yeah.
entertaining to watch.
And he does have the same hairstyle.
His
color.
was blue, I believe. I think he dyed his hair
Oh,
blue for
really?
his most recent fight.
All the ones I saw, it was like he had that white like bleach blonde kind of look. Is he going blue? That's a fun game. Like change his hair color for every fight.
I do love that sign of unity that shooter box fight guys have with like the dye blonde hair.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it looks very good. I admittingly like old Charles hair color more. But I'm also like, I'm not really big on dyeing hair as a person. I don't know. It's probably my personal taste.
That being said, though, it only works in individual sports, because I remember there was, I think Romania were playing in the World Cup, and all the players dyed their hair blonde, and the commentator legitimately struggled to tell which player was which.
Oh my god, that's genius though. Their other coach is just so confused. Oh my god, that's the teep kick to the double leg of soccer. Oh my god, that's a genius idea. How do you stop that?
So I will say, like, Felipe Dos Santos, I think is a worthy addition to the UFC. Obviously, 7-0 record, fighting mainly in Brazil, but of course had that LFA fight, which I think was his first fight in America. It's a strange one to make, though, given Manel Karp, because he was a guy who, he made his UFC debut around sort of 2020, I think. Dropped his first two against Pantoja and Nicolau. Both of those were disputed fights. Some people may argue that Karp did enough to win that one. And since then, it's 3 wins in a row. So he's beaten Odi Osborne, Zalgas Salmagulov, I hope I got that one right, and David Dvorak. 2 of those being some quite brutal finishes as well. And then you add in his stuff in Rising, where he beat Ian McCall, Kai Asakura, Takaya
Mizugaki.
Takaya Mizugaki, former Rising Bantamweight champion. So a lot of people after those first 2 fights thought, here's this guy which came in with a lot of fanfare. He's not living up to it. Has the tide started to turn with Karp? Is he starting to justify the praise that he got coming into the promotion?
I have a really hot take here.
Yes.
I think him losing those first 2 fights is the best thing that could have happened to him for this division.
I can see where you're coming from here, because the big issue that Manel Karp had, in my opinion, the reason he lost those 2 fights was inactivity. And since then, he's been a lot more forward.
And he has been much more exciting. I think, I don't think he's, I think he's almost as good as people say he is, right? Like, like you talk about the fanfare around him. I think he's almost that good. I think this guy is probably top 5 secretly in the division. I could see it. Man, he had a lot of fights pull out. Like Kai Kara France, you mentioned. Davis and Figueiredo was at one point. Oh, that would have been unbelievable.
If he stays a flyweight, they're going to book that.
They have to, right? Like, that's a dream match. Or I want Figgy KKF, honestly. That's a dream match for me. Figueiredo and Kai Kara France sounds unbelievable. Flyweight's so good right now. But this guy is really good. He's very quick, very good footwork. Not the best grappler, but very passable and solid in it. And he is lightning quick and accurate. He doesn't have that massive, Figueiredo or Kaikara France, power, that bombastic power, you could say. But he is lightning quick and accurate. Just against Zumagulov, he cracked him with a shot, realized he hurt him, and just machine gunned him down until he finished him. Just kept slowly adding longer and longer combinations, and it was so cool to see. The flying knee against Odie Osborne was fantastic, and I scored him losing his first two fights in the UFC, but I think it really helped him out, kind of pick up the pace, and I think relieving some of the pressure off of him to go out there and show that he's the man kind of makes it easier. It's like, okay, I got to go in there with nothing to lose, just have fun, do my thing. Kind of having that kind of level of pressure on him is really helped him out, because now he's just doing his thing and he's looked fantastic, I think. I'm very excited to see him in the future of the division.
And he's a rarity.
Not as the future, but.
And he's a rarity as well at flyweight, in that he's a 125er that packs power. You seldom see that. Like, I think on my hand, I can only think of like 3 flyweight fighters who you call sort of knockout artists, and it's Karl, Biggie, and John Dodson.
Oh, I was going to say Kaikara France. I consider him a KO artist.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say KKF has sort of one-shot power.
Yeah, I mean, the big one in my mind is the Cody Garbrandt. No offense to Cody Garbrandt at all.
Well, Cody's chin was going to be compromised at 125 anyway. It's a chinny Cody Garbrandt with an even chinnier weight class. Yeah,
and I think, but the Bontarin is what I think of. When he KO'd him with the straight right uppercut combination, and Herb Dean didn't stop the fight until they were announcing it was over.
I remember that one now.
Yeah, all the memes came out of Herb Dean's awful reffing. It's fantastic. But yeah, Manel Cape almost called him by.
You could have called him Manon there.
Yeah,
you got UFC Paris on the brain.
Oh, I'm too excited for it. I'm actually kind of excited for it. Manel Cape, I think he's got that power, but man, he's quick and he's accurate. It's kind of hard to say. I think you can argue he might be the best striker in the division. I mean, I'm sure there's guys who would not like hearing that, or would try and contend with that. I mean, Brandon Moreno has turned into got it. Brandon Moreno has turned into a very. I'm like, I've been watching The Sopranos too much. I talk with my hands a lot, but Brandon Moreno has turned into a very good striker. Figueiredo has pretty solid striking. Then you had Kaikara France, who's a very good striker. Manel Cape, probably in my mind, might have the best striking in the division, at least on a technical level. It'd be him and Moreno. I would probably pick. Most likely Cape. I'd probably pick between the two, even though I want to be biased and pick Moreno because I'm a fan. But he's so interesting. We mentioned it with Austin Lane. You want that uniqueness to it, and this is that was talking about heavyweight, which isn't a good division. That we want that kind of unique touch to it. Here is a very good division, and this is that unique guy that is coming up into that upper rankings to, add some more flavor to it.
And he's brash as well. He's a talker, and we know the UFC values that more and more these days.
He's a talker with an awful nickname. I'm sorry, I had to get that out there. His nickname made me laugh when I first heard it. But I don't know what it's a reference to, if it is a reference to something. But he is a very braggadocious,
it's a Starboy, isn't it?
Starboy, yeah. And I thought it made me think of the Jeff Bridges 80s movie Starman.
You've actually reminded me as well. I should have brought this up when we talked about Tarfer versus Lane. That Justin Tarfer's nickname is Badman, and it makes me think of Heel Rikishi.
Oh, I sent you that picture where it was the Homer Simpson do it for her,
Do it for The
and
Rock.
he'd do it for The Rock. Yeah, he did it for him. The best selling of a clothesline ever.
Yes, yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, yeah. I love Rikishi though. Big fan of his.
Um,
But
have you had any chance to look up Dos Santos's portfolio so far?
yeah, I have it here, and I looked it up going into it, but I have it up next to me just as a reference because my notes on it. I was like, the big thing I had in my notes was it's like he's kind of balanced in his how he's winning fights and everything like that, and it doesn't seem like he has an issue going the distance. So I mean, no, like flyweights typically have a good cardio, but sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes there's a guy, big finisher at flyweight, which he has finishes. 5 of his wins are finishes. Most of his wins are finishes. Um, Sometimes you get those guys in there that seem to really gas out if they're having success at any division, and doesn't seem to have that problem. Solid grappler, got got knockout wins. He has a lot of submissions, a good amount of submissions here for a guy that's 7-0, and yeah, I mean, I oh, he's young. Oh my,
22
that
years
is
old.
this if this guy has a good showing, I hate you never want to. You never want to predict like Tyson Pedro is going to be top 5. You never want to do a move like that. I'm sorry, I had to. Uh,
I'll hold up.
I'm
Hold
kidding.
me hands up.
Uh, no, hey, I listen. I defended you saying I think he can still do it. I think you might not be wrong yet, but um, you never want to, and you never want to like make a crazy claim. But if this guy has a really good show, be a mainstay in this division, and as we all love Charles Oliveira now,
We
you
do,
know,
and it took a
yeah,
long time for people to really sort of. But I think people always liked Charles Oliveira,
hmm
but I don't think
he
they
was a
ever
boy.
loved him until. I think the turning point was beating Dustin.
Yeah,
Because I think there was still a lot of people out there that thought, well, yeah, Khabib's retired, he beat Michael Chandler, it's a little bit of a paper belt. And then beating Dustin Poirier was the moment people realized, he has actually just gotten that much better.
people hated him after he beat Tony, rightfully so, I dare say. Um,
Yeah, it wasn't a good fight. It wasn't a good fight.
no,
And people
but he
people still
dominated him.
wanted the Tony sort of experiment to happen.
I mean, that's a whole can of worms. That's us trying not to talk about the card again. I just feel it. Long story short, he shouldn't have cut weight twice, and that and getting pounded by Gaethje ruined him because of the weight. Anyways, so Dos Santos, everyone likes Charles Oliveira. No, I'm not doing this. I'm not being this guy. Everyone likes Charles Oliveira. So, like, if you're describing him as this Charles Oliveira for flyweight, man, that sounds really fun. Especially if he matures into it, kind of like we saw Charles Oliveira. I mean, Shoot Box isn't. Yeah, there was a point in time, big Pride fan here. For one point in time, I remember where Shoot Box was the fight camp. You see this happen all the time. There's always that one fight camp that's just dominates for a while. Shoot Box was it for a while. Then AKA was it for a good period of time.
Miletich in the early years.
Miletich as well. We had the American Top Team takeover not that
Jackson
long
Wink.
ago. Jackson Wink had a really long run at the top. I know Matt Hume's team only really had Mighty Mouse, but I always respected them. Team Quest had a great run for a while. Kind of a little tease at something called the main show on the main channel, but with Team Quest, Matt Lindland, Dan Henderson, and family friend of mine, former rest in peace Evan Tanner, and
Randy Couture.
Randy Couture was Team Quest, yeah. And then he had a huge run. His gym, Extreme Couture, had a great run.
I think Extreme Couture is still doing really well.
Yeah, they're kind of coming back, which is fantastic.
Well, look what they did with Francis.
Yeah, they made Francis go from like, oh, you're a really fun commodity to you're the best. They're the baddest dude on the planet. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
But Shoot Box is what isn't what they used to be, but they have definitely turned around from their dark period. Something I hate being this guy. The other big ones, of that era, like Brazilian Top Team and Nova União, which had a good run in like with the lower weight classes with Aldo and Renan Barão. They never really got to that level where Shooter Box has come back. So I would love to see Shooter Box kind of come back, because there was a long like idea that King's MMA took all the best Shooter Box people and made it their own when they had Verdum. Vanderlei was doing better and is kind of a small resurgence. So here with Rafael Cordeiro and all that. But Shooter Box has been doing good lately. And man, the Felipe dos Santos, 22. Oh, this is a big step up for him. And if he at least doesn't get blown out, this could be huge for the division.
I expect Dos Santos to get a second chance regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
I am picking Manel Kape to win this one. I think that jumping quality for a 22-year-old is just going to be too high for Felipe. With that being said, I will say if there's one division I feel that you can sort of come from the regional scene and break in immediately, I'd probably say it's flyweight, because that was what I think Steve Erceg, I think that's his name, he did that against David Ibarra, got the win, and he's got himself into the rankings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's awesome about flyweight is I'm going to say that I do think the best flyweights are in the UFC. You know, it's not like other divisions where it's like, okay, definitely the UFC has the best of it. Flyweight, I think there's a little bit of an argument in other places, but I think it's the best here. But flyweights are good around the world.
Yeah.
You know,
like Hovaguchi.
Yeah, I would kill for him to be back in the UFC.
Yeah.
I want him back so bad, but
yeah, we will reminisce about, we will sort of mourn the flyweights who are not in the UFC. And while we do that, we're going to be jumping, 140 pounds and talking about the heavyweights again. It's our core main event as Tai Tuivasa takes on Alexander Volkov. Tuivasa comes into this one plus 160, so is the underdog, up against Alexander Volkov, who you can get a minus 215. Now, I'm going to start this by asking quite a probing question to open up this segment of the show. In hindsight, was beating Derek Lewis a bad thing for Tai Tuivasa's career? Because obviously he gets that win. I think he was 11 or 12 at the time he fought Derek Lewis, fighting number 3. He gets the big win. A lot of people are like, oh my god, Tai Tuivasa just did that to Derek Lewis. But since then, because he's now number 3 in the world, he's now having to fight the Cyril Garns, the Sergei Pavloviches of the world. Fighting guys that maybe are just a little bit above his talent level. No disrespect to Tai Tuivasa.
I don't think it is, because, I mean, it made him a star, you know? Like, he's probably the second biggest star in that division right now to, like, casual fan bases. Everyone knows him as, oh, that's the big guy who, like, that drinks
from the shoe.
Yeah, he drinks from the shoe, you know? He has he's kind of an odd body on him. Like the muffin topping guy that drinks a shoey. I'm muffin topping too, buddy. Don't worry. Me and Tai Tuivasa are the same. But yeah, you know, it's. I think it probably helped him out, made him a good amount of money. Something that doesn't happen too often in the sport, because certain people don't pay very well. But you know, but man, it's probably not too good on his physical health, because that Cyril Gane fight is a barn burner, and he took punishment in that fight.
He did, like, especially to the body. And I will say, you know, like, maybe some people might think I'm a little bit critical about Tai Tuivasa, about like his performance against like Pavlovich and Gane. Now the Pavlovich one, obviously Sergei Pavlovich is who he is. He just blows people out the window in the first round. But he managed to coax Cyril Gane, so like evasive striking extraordinaire at the heavyweight division. That'll probably come back to haunt me because this is going out after Fight Night Paris. But he coaxed Cyril Gane into a brawl. Like, and then he got the best out of Cyril in that fight.
Cyril Gane admits he got KO'd in it. He goes, I don't remember. And I'm like, what? He goes, you remember getting knocked down? How'd you react? I don't remember getting knocked down. They told me I did, so I'm assuming I did. And I'm like, oh, so you got knocked out. Oh, that's crazy. That fight's awesome. Or, it reminds me of Rich Franklin and Vanderlei Silva's second fight, where Rich Franklin openly said, like, when you got knocked down, he goes, "No, I got knocked out. I don't remember the last, like, I only remember the last round." And they told me, "Hey, you won a 5-round decision." Cool. How? Haunting stuff. Terrifying sport we have, but um, that fight's so good. Oh god, now I'm thinking about that fight. I was so happy I got to rewatch it for this. I saw, I was like going, "Oh, this card doesn't look very good," but I get to rewatch this fight again.
Yep.
Um, he he forces the brawl, and if he can't do it and he can't catch you, he does struggle. Like, because remember he had that really rough patch. He lost to your boy Blagoy Ivanov. Dos Santos just caught him,
In
but then
Blagoy's
was it?
best UFC fight, I should point that out.
Yeah, and also on the Retro Review series where he choked him after the bell. Uh, hey, I totally spaced that happened until I watched it again. Um, but he beat, and I think it was Alir Latifi. Was he the third man? No, that was third man was Hulk Hogan, but I know that one got you. It was Spivak.
Yes.
Spivak arm triangle though. Yeah, I thought Alir Latifi was the third man,
And a lot of
but
people gave Tuivasa hell after that Spivak loss. And
and in
somehow
hindsight,
Spivak's turned into a pretty good fighter.
that has aged incredibly well.
Yeah.
um, and Spivak, the guy who beat Cyril Gahn. See, we got to cover all the bases here.
Yes.
We got to cover all the bases. Um, yeah, I think still made myself laugh. I think he's good. I think he's like probably going to be that like top 6, 7 gatekeeper. As much as I would love a Tai Tuivasa title reign, I just don't see it happening.
You do
Um,
realize how close we were to getting John Jones versus Tai Tuivasa, UFC 285.
could have actually, we almost did. It realistically almost have it, and but like I don't think we're gonna see it. Sadly, I mean, because like in Gone, that's just a rough matchup for him. That's just a really rough matchup for him. Because I remember at the time, it was, I think they were like back to back weekends. It was Aspinall and Blades and Gone to Ivasa. And I was like, oh, that feels awkward. I feel like it should have been Aspinall to Ivasa versus Gone Blades.
Yeah, because with that you would have tested Cyril's grappling. Because we know
Yeah.
Curtis Blade's going to try and take it to the ground.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, because it's like, oh, well, has he learned from when Ngannou showed off that his last name was Ngamanov? Dagestani Ngannou, or D1. He called him D1 Ngannou, and it was like, oh, like how does he fare from that?
I will say,
You didn't hear that, did you?
I just want
You
to go
didn't.
on. I just want to go onto a tangent here because
Mm.
obviously, like I was one of the people. It's a shame. Like I actually read that the pay-per-view numbers for Ngannou versus Gane weren't that great, but I was one of the people who was really psyched for this because I thought here are
Too.
two sort of heavyweight fighters. You got like Cyril, who is sort of more of a technician, and the sort of brute power of Francis. And there's this shot that one of the cameramen caught where it's Francis going in for the takedown. It's like Cyril's right up in the air, and you can see the faces of everyone in the crowd. And I know part of it's just probably, whoa, Francis with the takedown. I like to see it more of, oh my god, Francis is wrestling?
I love reactions of crowds, and specifically Dana White during fights when it's his boy getting beat. Um, but I that fight I did not know it didn't do that well, because that fight was huge for me.
I did. I mean, I built a whole
That fight's
video.
awesome.
I built a whole video around sort of like this is how far heavyweight's come. I did about like sort of like the Tim Sylvia era of heavyweight, sort of frame it around this is
Yeah,
how good it is now, and oh look how far we've come.
man, Ngannou was awesome. He would have killed John Jones.
Yes. Yeah.
Had to throw that out there. Had to throw that out there.
So
John Jones ducked him. Not that
let's
early.
try and get this
But
back on
this
track.
fight though is good.
Yeah.
This fight's good though. This fight's very good. I think, you know, I mean, I would have loved that Tai Tuivasa Aspinall fight if it happened. But speaking of Tom Aspinall, that's where Tom Aspinall, shocked the world, and you know, my debut on the channel, um, is the Volkov
Yes, good to
on the
get us
other
back
side.
on track here. So yeah, we're going to talk about Alexander Volkov here. Now, 36-10 record for a guy who is, I believe, 33 years old. So that's a lot of mileage, especially at heavyweight for Alexander Volkov. So notable wins when it comes to his career. You've got people like Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Tabura, Alistair Overeem. I think that was Overeem's last fight before leaving the UFC. Also has wins over
Yeah,
Verdum, Struve, Roy Nelson, Tim Johnson. And if you go outside the UFC, he was the first guy to beat my boy Blagoy. And also has a win over Rico Rodriguez, the former UFC champion.
Oh yeah, he has a very interesting history. Because he was at one point, he beat like Brett Rogers, and stuff like that over because he was Bellator's heavyweight champion for a while. And I remember he had a fight with, was it Mighty Mo? I'm looking for it.
Czech
Was it
Congo.
him that he head kicked Mighty Mo? No, yeah, Czech Congo wrestled him down,
Yeah.
but I thought he head kicked Mighty Mo. Maybe I'm crazy. I thought he did. Apologies. Could be lying to me though. But he came into the UFC with like not a ton of fanfare, and then he beat Verdum, and it just blew up. I thought, and then his next fight after that, um, well, he won. I will say, he dominated 14 minutes of it, but he's super good still. Like he's a good hand. He's that Billy Gunn. He's like a better good hand. I would not put him on. Like I think I'd say he's better than that Val Venus level. He's more like daddy ass Billy Gunn, badass Billy Gunn. You know, I had to call him daddy ass. Um, uh, he came back Sunday as badass Billy Gunn. He wasn't daddy ass. He was badass Billy Gunn Sunday. But anyways, he's really good, and he poses an interesting kind of foil to Tai Tuivasa. This matchup's actually pretty fun,
Yeah.
because Volkov is really good at using his length to wear his opponents out, and then he kind of just pounces and gets that kill. Like against Overeem, he's just wearing him out with boxing and keeping him out. A lot of snap kicks, trying to wear him out and stuff any big attempts that Overeem at getting offense. And then eventually he just, because it's heavyweight, everyone hits really hard at heavyweight. He just eventually put him out. Walt Harris, who was super awesome for a short period of time, was this guy who should have been fighting at 205, but was so fast at heavyweight that he just stayed there. And he kept Walt Harris out and just kept kicking him with snap kicks up the middle. No double leg after, but snap kicks up the middle and just teeps all the time, and eventually wore him out and finished him that way. I think it was up the middle with a kick, if I remember, body shot. But then he just kind of wears you out and, eventually beats you, kind of similar to what Gon was doing to Tuivasa. And so I think what makes this interesting, though, is has Tuivasa improved enough to that level to punish that style? Can he land on that chin again? Because he did crack Gon, he just couldn't finish him.
Yeah.
But could he do that to Volkov, similar to what Derek Lewis did? Maybe.
And we've
It's interesting.
seen in the past as well how Volkov, I think one of Volkov's big weaknesses is the overhand right. It's what Derek Lewis put him out with.
Mm.
And we have seen other fighters catch him using that method as well. One of the things I like about Volkov, I think Volkov's too good to be a boy, but he's always been a heavyweight fighter I
Yeah.
have always respected. I think he's one of the
Yeah,
few
same
fighters
here.
in this weight class who I think he can use his reach advantage, because that was always a big criticism that people had with Stefan Struve. Struve was a 7-foot fighter who didn't know he was 7 foot. I think Volkov knows he's 6'9", 6'10", and utilizes it very well. I like as well that Volkov was always seen to me as always quite gangly, but these days he's proper filling out his heavyweight frame, and with that has come a lot more power. So now he's finishing guys nowadays. I think this is a really good litmus test for how good Tai Tuivasa is. If Tai Tuivasa still wants to be seen as an elite heavyweight, he's got to beat guys like Volkov. Because I've got a list here of the guys who've beaten Volkov in the UFC. Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades, Cyril Gane, Tom Aspinall.
4 guys that were, top 1 guys, number 1 contenders at some point. Tom Aspinall will be one day. We kind of know that's coming. I think a lot of us are very aware of that. And at least predicting that, I should say. Not aware of it, but predicting that is probably better verbiage. And so you have to be one of the best to beat him. Could Tai Tuivasa make this big comeback? I mean, one thing I'll say about what I like about this fight is it's very... Tai Tuivasa is like an improvement on the old school heavyweight of, I'm just going to get in there and throw some bombs and kick you really hard if I can, but just crack you with pure brawling power. And Volkov is... And I hate this term because I feel like it disrespects a lot of the division, but it is accurate. He's a skilled heavyweight.
Yeah.
He relies on his technique and skill rather than his God-given power or physical attributes. And I think that's kind of an interesting inverse of each other, so it's definitely going to be an interesting one because, Pavlovich and Gane I would consider skilled, and that was Tuivasa's last 2 fights, so...
I'm very interested to see what the clinch battle is going to be like in this fight, because that's somewhere I feel that both fighters, they can find strength in. I think Volkov's clinch game, with the way he throws knees and elbows, I think that's something that he's got a lot better at recently. And Tai Tuivasa, this is probably the only time I'll ever compare the two. You know how Leon Edwards gets so much praise for the way that he's able to throw elbows in the clinch, especially when he's like coming out the clinch, he'll throw an elbow. And Tai Tuivasa does the same thing. I think his elbows is one of his biggest strengths, and a lot of people don't acknowledge that.
That's how he KO'd Lewis.
Yes.
Yeah, he KO'd Lewis with the elbow on the break because he hurt him. Lewis tied up, and he pressed Lewis against the cage, and then on the break he elbowed him, cracked him clean. And sadly, welterweights just don't have that kind of crazy power. They do it heavyweight, or Leon Edwards would have 1,000 elbow KOs like that. But Tai Tuivasa, he's got elbow KOs like that, and that's a very good point. I never thought about that, but how the clinch would go, because they're both active there. One's active during the clinch, and Tuivasa's incredibly active on the break. So, and very interesting.
It's going to be an interesting fight. I think we've got 2 strikers here, both with very sort of conflicting sort of ways that they approach the striking. Volkov being much more of a technician, Tai being the big power puncher. Which style is going to pay off? Who are you picking to win this one?
I have to go with the philosophy of skill here. I'm going to go with Volkov. I love both these guys. I'm big fans of both of them. So I hate the fact that there has to be a winner. But I think he's going to do to him what Derek Lewis, he did to Derek Lewis for the most part. Alistair Overeem, Verdum, all these others, where he uses the length and breaks him down slowly. And I don't think it'll beat him. I don't think he'll punish him as hard as the punishment he took in the Gane fight, but I think he will get probably a 3rd round, maybe 2nd round finish, I can see. Because he does have that power. He's getting much more finishes.
I'm going to pick Volkov to win this one, and I'm going to go by decision. I think there's going to be moments where Volkov could potentially hurt Tai. It's all like, he's up against the fence, can Tai survive, that sort of thing, and Tai's still able to persevere. But I am going to pick Volkov to win this one. I'm still high on Volkov.
I understand. Yeah, I'm very much the same way. of the opinion. I think we have the same opinion on this fight. That said, man, what if Ty does it? Like, I don't know. I hate that there has to be a winner here. Matchmaking's hard. That's
Yeah.
why I want to do it. Let me do it, UFC. Go on.
Well, they did
I'm the
that whole
perfect guy
sort
for the
of
job.
they did that whole sort of become a UFC matchmaker for the day, that sort of prize pot thing, didn't he?
Yeah, I I like to think that it's like, all right, you get to choose this fight card with these available fighters, and it's like, uh, the main event, Andre Arlovsky versus Jake Collier 5. Tough luck, kid. Tough luck, goof. You know.
Because I know they get the opportunity to like sort of like book like join like Sean Shelby McMahon for like a matchmaking event, and it'd be like you can pick who Priscilla Casheware's next opponent is.
Valentina Shevchenko. Oh, the rematch we've all wanted.
You
You
think you're
think you're
special?
special? It's the way to do it. It's the way to do it. Like, that's how I imagine it. Like, it's like you get to pick the opponent for this next person, and it's like, oh, I'm trying to think of somebody. Priscilla Cachoeira was the perfect name, honestly. Uh, it really is. It's like, okay. Um, that's what it feels like. I don't believe them that they're gonna give me full power if I won that,
Yeah,
because I know what the first fight I would do is. I
and
would
that
do
is
like, okay, Alex Bejeda versus Conor McGregor. Oh, oh, I don't know why either.
it is time for us to talk about our main event of the evening, and we are going down to the middleweight division. Israel Adesanya is back in action, of course, being from New Zealand. It's appropriate that he's fighting it down under again, but it's not against the opponent that a lot of people thought it was going to be, because UFC 290, they had the match between DDP and Robert Whittaker, and it was very much framed that the winner of this one would be fighting Israel Adesanya at UFC 293. Dricus du Plessis won that fight, but the turnaround was too quick for him. So UFC needed a short notice replacement, and it's Sean Strickland, the king of the Apex, who is stepping in for this one. Bookmakers, though, not giving Strickland much of a chance. A plus 425 underdog. Israel Adesanya comes in at minus 650. So we'll start by framing this question in this way, Joe. Given that the UFC and given that the fan base knew that UFC 293 was going to be headlined by Adesanya, why was Whittaker versus du Plessis booked 3 months before?
Um, I have a theory. Okay, what if they fully, like 90? I would say 90% of people on the planet expected Rob to win, and this was their way of going, you can fight him again, sure, on short notice, and stop asking for the title shot, because you know, Rob has like kind of similar to situation to Max Holloway, where they're just gonna keep it, at least until DDP did it. They were just beating everybody, you know. So I guess endless rematches with the champ, the city kickboxing champion, and so that's kind of what I think. Or a more fun one for me is to just say that I should be matchmaking for him.
I love that
You know.
conspiracy theory, though, about wanting Bob to win, because you could also make the argument that the UFC likes Sean Strickland
Mm-hmm.
and they want to try and justify him fighting for a belt because he knows obviously he's going to talk a big matchup, he's going to generate a lot of views and that sort of thing. And given the choice between Whittaker, who's lost to Adesanya twice, or a fresh face in Sean Strickland, more people would be thinking, no, I want something different.
Yeah, we've been saying it a lot. You
Yeah.
know, all this entire card, and so Sean Strickland is something different.
Whether different's
He's
good,
he's a
uh,
very different kind of person. I know a lot of people like Sean Strickland in real life, being from Oklahoma, I will say, And it's very funny seeing a guy I feel like I graduated high school with talking like that in the UFC. It's hilarious. Um, but he is definitely different.
I think one of the things this situation's also done as well is it's made people realize the change that the UFC have taken in terms of like booking title fights. Because it used to
Mhm.
be once upon a time where if the UFC had the match to book in the weight class, they would hold off until both fighters were ready and then do it like at that point. Because a lot of people remember like Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit was supposed to headline 193 in Australia, the 60,000 card. But
Yeah.
both of them picked up injuries, and rather than having Lawler fighting some random guy on short notice, they waited until Condit was ready and then did that fight in January. And of course,
Yeah.
it ended up being one of the best fights of the year. Nowadays, the UFC seem to take this approach of the trains leave the station on time, regardless of how full they are. Israel Adesanya is headlining in Australia, regardless of who it's against.
Yeah. That's just kind of how it is. And it doesn't help the fact that Izzy's team also his coach specifically is really big on like pushing narratives himself. Like so he had a statement recently where he said like now DDP has in the back of the line. Tough luck. This ain't for you. Get out. You're in the back of the line now. Time to climb your way back up to the title. And it's just, who are you? That's all I can ever think is, who are you again?
I was loving the
Yeah.
sass there. Don't
His
don't don't go
yeah.
there, girlfriend.
Yeah, he's very much a diva search circa 2005. Um,
The dark years.
one of my favorite eras of wrestling, ruthless aggression, I will say. But yeah, it's he. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. There's something about this fight. I'm gonna say, I. So in other sports, I've been watching a lot of like this series on YouTube called NBA Open Court, where they have legends or people and veterans of the NBA talk about topics and stories. And they talked this week about it's an old episode. It's a really old series, but they were talking about the nights where you just have an easy night just to pad your stats and like well how they would kind of prepare for it and stuff like that. That's kind of the vibe I get with this one. Is this seems like we're here to pad Izzy's stats and help push the narrative the UFC kind of has for Izzy, which is that he's going to be the greatest ever at middleweight. And I think in my opinion, there's a very valid argument for him being there. Um, I put two people above him currently. One of them being Rich Franklin. The other one I'm ashamed to say because he lost his last fight. So I'm just gonna hide behind this. Um, but that's kind of the narrative they want to push. It's kind of like with Usman. They were pushing really hard that he was the greatest welterweight ever because they don't like George St. Pierre. And I feel like that's what this fight is here for, to help kind of boost that. Like, look at how many title defenses he got against the loud trash talking and mind game playing Sean Strickland.
I should also point out as well the reason Joe is listing them two is you disqualify people who pop the steroids, so you
Oh,
don't include Anderson.
yeah, it's a very good one. Yeah, I should have specified that for. I don't count Anderson. Anderson is probably it for a ton of people, but if you've popped hot in your career once, I have to question every fight they've ever had. So that kind of negates you, and like John Jones, we've mentioned him a couple of times. John Jones has popped hot many times. I now wonder if he's ever had a fight where he wasn't able to lift up Tito's head with one arm. Like I have to question that, and like I just don't want to. It's just too much for your history and legacy, I think. So I like Rich Franklin. I have above him. And Dan Henderson, I think, could probably get up there too, but there wasn't enough for me personally. I think of him more as 205. But yeah, this is a weird one. Like it's really weird matchmaking. I'm of the belief they should have done the Robbie Lawler Carlos Condit thing.
And waited until DDP was ready.
Yeah, because at this point we're giving title shots to people, just anybody. It feels like, and I feel like that demeans a title a little bit. It devalues it. Sadly, it really doesn't, but it does in the moment, right? Like in the long term, does this devalue the title? Not at all. But for now, it's going to feel like it a little bit, especially if a guy like Sean. Spoiler alert, I'm not picking him. Sean Strickland wins. It's like, oh, okay, so now what? Like, it just kind of, I feel like you're playing a dangerous game. And I have this saying when it comes to doing stupid things in life and why I won't do it is, like, if I don't want to lose, why play the game? And the UFC's kind of playing this game.
So we'll talk about our two participants in a little bit more detail here. We'll start off with our champion, Israel Adesanya, a 24-2 record. Notable wins on his resume include Derek Brunson, Anderson Silva, Kelvin Gastelum in one of the best fights over the past 5 years. Also, Yoel Romero, Paulo Costa, 2 wins over Marvin Vettori, 2 wins over Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier, and for a lot of people, maybe not so much in terms of what he achieved in the sport, but in terms of what it meant to Adesanya, Alex Pereira.
Mm-hmm. I think you had a mistake there. You said 2 wins over.
Yes. I knew you were going to bring this up. You strongly believe Whittaker won the second fight.
I watched that fight this week, and every time I've watched it, probably about like 5-6 times, I still score it the same way. I'm also incredibly biased. Robert Whittaker is one of my favorites ever.
Yeah.
So.
Personally, I'm always of the belief that it's okay for people to have biases, but you can't try and let your biases sort of blur how you think a fight's going to go. So if I was saying, oh, I don't like Nunes, so I think Aldana's going to whip it, that's me not doing my job.
I think my approach to it is I just admit it, so everyone, because at the end of the day, a prediction isn't a factual statement; it's an opinion.
Yeah.
And opinions can be influenced. So I openly admit my bias when I feel like it could play a factor in something, so people understand how I came from, how I got to point A to point B, in a sense, to kind of give some insight. That said, it was a clean sweep, absolute domination by Bob in that fight, and uncrowned champ, DDP's the champ.
So let's take ourselves back to April here. So we have that fight against Alex Pereira, and a lot of the narrative going into that one was Pereira being 3-0 because there's a lot of people who sort of a lot of people take on board the kickboxing fights, and there was a real divided opinion, I feel, in the aftermath of that fight, because there was a lot of people who they sympathized with Adesanya. They saw this guy who was hounded by Pereira for almost the past decade, and to see Izzy finally getting that revenge. There was a lot of people thinking, yes, good for you, well done. And a lot of people have thought, oh God, this fool has got his belt back. Where do you personally lean? Like, Izzy is a divisive figure, especially in this day and age.
I'm actually in the middle because I understand having that guy. I'm not going to go too into it, but a friend of mine, we did a memorial to him in in honor of a dedication to him in the first ever retro review. Plug, go watch it, it's great. And my friend Ant, he made a joke once to me, and it's always kind of stuck with me. That he goes, if you're like the second best at everything you do, like in all our hobbies. I wasn't ever the best in this competitive fighting game or in competitive card game, which I got really good and was almost paid to play professionally at. I always felt like my friend, him, was better than me. And so I definitely understand having that monkey on your back, kind of that number, that guy always looming over you and kind of creating that. So I empathize with that very much so. And I also I understand a lot of the disrespect and hate he was getting because of that. Like he made Pejeda's kid cry, which is hilarious. I'm gonna be honest, that's funny because that's the same kid who, when he got knocked out in kickboxing, who did the stiffened up and Masvidal fall in front of him to make fun of him to his face after he just got knocked out. That's really dirty from that little kid. If I would have gotten swamped if I was that kid growing up, man. Whew. And so him making that kid cry was honestly hilarious to me. I'll be honest.
Brah? You're making kids cry,
Yeah.
brah.
That's my OSW tattoo I'm getting. You're making kids cry, Izzy, bruh. Making kids cry, bruh. Crush Izzy. Oh my god. But yeah, yeah. It on the same hand. I'm not a fan of Izzy. I can't act like I'm not. I find him to be very willing to be boring. And he is in the cage. He's very willing to be boring. So is George St. Pierre. That isn't enough to make me hate you, or make not hate, but dislike you as a fighter. That's so, But he's also like really cringy and just grinds my gears. Like I feel like if he was like a person I knew in real life, like that personality, I'd be like, man, I don't know how you guys hang out with that guy. That guy just annoys the hell out of me. I feel like I'd be doing that. You know. I don't know. I'm kind of in that middle because he almost made me a fan and won me back over. Then he shot an arrow at him as he was unconscious, and I was like, "Oh, that was weird. That was corny. Come on, like at least do the whole Tito Ortiz thing where you dig the grave. Like that was always corny to me, but kind of funny."
Yeah. Do you think that I think maybe that was because Tito had that element, especially later in his career, he had that element of cringe, that element of sort of corniness about him. Whereas, is he supposed to be the champion? He's the face of the middleweight division, and he's behaving like a stroppy teenager.
Yeah, yeah. We mentioned this before on the show, how before we started recording. I brought up my tattoo, and I'm showing this now for reference. I have a tattoo of Persona 5 Royal. Persona 5. It's my favorite video game of all time. It is an anime video game, but I hate weebs. And Izzy's a weeb. Like he's like a big weeb, and that's what makes this press conference gonna be so funny. Is Strickland's gonna like just go at him. Like the press conference is almost as interesting as the fight to me. Admittingly, like you could tail the tape and put that on pay-per-view, and I might actually like be tempted. But that said, yeah, he's like a weirdly grating guy, and I think a lot of us, pro wrestling fans in particular, felt disrespected by him walking out as the Undertaker, and then putting on one of the worst title fights in like the last couple months, because a couple months before that, Rose Carla I think happened, or maybe it was after. Rough year for title fights when you think about that. But also that same year had like Yuri and Glover, so I guess it balances out. But it was like
Well,
and he's really divisive.
I had money on Carlo winning that fight, so I don't hate it as much as other people do.
I think you and me both picked Carla, so I hate it because I watched it twice for the recap. You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. Like, I watched it twice for the recap. It was horrible. Why did I do that to myself?
So we might have criticisms of Israel Adesanya as the person. There's no criticizing Israel Adesanya the fighter, though. His fighting style might not be the most flashy, especially when there's a little bit of Tim Sylvia about him, in that when he's chasing the belt, he's a lot more aggressive, he's a lot more willing to take chances, but when he has the belt, he does play it a little bit safe, and I'm the first to admit that. With that being said, though, very talented fighter. Incredible
Talent. He's one of the few guys that came into the UFC as just a striker and made it work. Like, it's kind of cool seeing that come back, because that hasn't really been a thing in years. You see guys, get close to winning titles as just grapplers. Like Khabib could kind of strike a little bit, but he was mostly just grappling. I'm just gonna wrestle you, and but but you never really see that with strikers. It was kind of awesome for a little bit. He's very smooth, very technical. Like flashy, not really, but he's very smooth, so it kind of gives that illusion of like it feels like he doesn't put a ton of effort, very effortless moving at times, and it's kind of hypnotic, I guess you could say. But like I said earlier, he's willing to be boring. You know, he's sometimes people are willing to bite down on that mouthpiece and let it rip. You know, happy retirement to Korean Zombie, one of the best guys to ever do it like that. Some guys are just happy to be boring, or they're willing to loosen up on that mouthpiece and just be boring, kind of play it safe. And Izzy's one of those guys. You know, it's not necessarily too fun at times, but he wins. You know.
So let's talk about his opponent going into this fight, Sean Strickland, 27-5 record. A lot of those did take place at welterweight though. I think he's only ever had 2 losses as a middleweight, especially in the UFC. I'm going to open up by asking this question. What, in your opinion, is Sean Strickland's best win in terms of name value and in terms of performance?
Oh, that's hard. My brain says Jack Hermanson. But I also feel like I thought he beat. If I remember right, I thought he beat Jared Cannonier initially. Because I rewatched that fight this week, and I scored it for Cannonier, I believe. But I forgot what my initial reaction was to it. Interesting. I guess it would be Hermanson.
Well, for me, it's either between Hermanson or, in terms of performance, Brendan Allen.
My point. That's it. That one's wins aged pretty well.
My point is, though, is that I think Sean Strickland is a solid fighter. You can sort of understand why he's given the sort of pedestals he has. But I don't think his claim to a title fight is all that strong. Because it's a 2-fight winning streak, beating Imavov and then Abus Magomedov, who his UFC career was 13 seconds before that fight. And UFC have seen that and thought, yes, that's enough to give Sean Strickland a chance to become the baddest 185er on the planet.
Yeah. His resume isn't solid. He is just in the limelight a lot because he does fight in a lot of 5-rounders. He's popular because he talks too, you know, a very controversial talker as well.
Yes.
And just a ridiculous human being. It's hilarious. Like I almost think it's a character. Then you go, no, he's real. He's this crazy. But he just, it's so weird. Like I don't know if it's matchmaking, but or what? Because he lose, like, you know, the Cannonier is a very good fighter, but he's 2-0, or he's 1-2 straight, and he's getting the title shot. Such an odd situation.
Like, honestly, even though Cannonier had that one-sided loss against Izzy, I think Cannonier doing what he did to Marvin Vettori puts him higher up the pedestal, the pecking order, than Sean Strickland, in my personal opinion.
I think so too.
You did make a good point, though. Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Oh, no, yeah, because okay. My brain instantly for a split second, I was like, oh, yeah, he finished Vettori. I was like, oh, no, he didn't. But he did beat him pretty
It
rough.
was that was like a 50-43 or something like that. It was one-sided.
Yeah. Massive stomping.
You did make a good point, though, mentioning before. Like, I think a big reason why the UFC are making this fight is because of that press conference and because Sean Strickland is willing to talk the talk. Even if the sort of like his sort of walk the walk doesn't keep up with the pace of his mouth. There's some analogy in there somewhere going on. And
his mouth writes a check, his butt isn't cashing. You know,
that's the one. We'll use that one.
Yeah.
My point is, though, is that we're seeing this a lot more when it comes to the UFC in terms of the fighters there putting a shine on. Now, the UFC has always been counterculture. It's always been sort of like us against the world, we're against the system, even back into the days when John McCain was trying to close it down. I think the UFC, for whatever reason, are being a lot more blatant in this sort of counterculture. And we're seeing this with the way that, like, Sean Strickland is headlining pretty much every single Apex card because he openly caused controversy. Colby Covington is getting a title shot because he openly caused controversy. Juliana Pena, same thing's going to happen. She's going to jump right back into a title fight. Are you liking this trend from the UFC that they're sort of openly going for people who are riling the fan base up?
No. We talk a lot about pro wrestling here.
Yes.
You know, because we're both pro wrestling fans, and we openly acknowledge how they're not like siblings, but they're cousins sports to each other. There's a connection between the two. But at the end of the day, despite the connections and the references we make and all the jokes and stuff, this isn't pro wrestling. In professional wrestling, there's a guy like Roman Reigns can go unbeaten or whatever for like 5-10 years because someone decided that's going to happen. Whereas here, I feel like in a sport where meritocracy is winning and losing, not just, you know, other factors in and how much people like you and stuff, it should be meritocracy based. I don't like this idea of the UFC pushing fighters that just talk, you know. I'm going to bring him up because, you know, he's currently champion somehow. But Sean O'Malley lost a fight to Petr Yan. He won, technically, sure, but, you know. And that was the only person at the time who was ranked that he fought. And it's because he talks, and they protected him, and they kept him. There's a reason they never made the Paddy versus Topuria fight, because they know they want to milk more out of Paddy. You know, there's a reason Conor didn't fight wrestlers coming up until he was in the title picture. It's because they didn't want him losing, you know. And I think they're so willing to push these people who don't deserve things just because they talk. Excuse me. Just because they talk. And I feel like it's because they're lazy. You know, we talk about this often on the channel. On the show specifically, we talk about it a lot. The UFC doesn't have very many stars right now. And they haven't made a ton of new stars. And the reason for that is because they forgot their fight promotion, and they don't promote fighters or fights really. They just hope the fighters do it when that isn't their job. Their job is to make weight, not cheat, and win a fight, or fight and try to win a fight.
Like,
that's their job.
I can count on my hand like the amount of fighters who have become big stars based on what they've done in cage. It can happen. Like, GSP was a big star, Anderson was a big star. But you look at the length of the winning streaks those guys had to build to become superstars. And if you don't have those sort of like long winning streaks, they're going to go for the guys who just talk and big up themselves.
Yeah. You either need to be a controversy magnet or talk. Because that's the only reason John Jones is a star, is because he's a controversy magnet.
Yes.
And Anderson, I think, like, Anderson Silva, GSP, stars, but they had huge streaks and were legends in the sport until one popped hot. And he's still a legend. But he's just not. It's the whole thing. But, like, guys like Aldo, Dominic Cruz was actually kind of a star relatively, but not like mega big.
Mighty Mouse.
Guys, Mighty Mouse is the big one, who at one point in time was the baddest dude on the planet, pound for pound. Guys like Robert Whittaker, you know. Habib was a star because of the Conor touch, and then the Conor connection, and the controversy of him flying, stomping on Dylan Dennis, which is a fantastic picture. But like guys like Tony was like hardcore fans loved Tony Ferguson to help his numbers out, but he was a kind of a talker as well, and a controversy kind of a guy. Cowboy's like one of the few guys that probably was relative stardom for where his level of success in the cage, because the casuals knew who Cowboy was. But he wasn't really a talker, and the UFC actually pushed him because that's their guy. They loved Cowboy because he was always company man.
Yes.
DC company man. So either you're a company man and sucking up to the UFC and bailing him out of bad situations, or you talk, and that's like the only ways to get pushed. And I'm not a fan of it because it takes away from the meritocracy of things. Because in a perfect world, Sean O'Malley would have fought through would had to have fought through guys like Sanhagen, Cheeto in a rematch, and like, oh God forbid, Marab. That would have been a crazy one. And he probably, but he kind of talked his way into where he got to. And I mean, he won the belt. Credit to him for winning the belt. But his path there is where I criticize, right? That's what I'm specifically saying here. I'm not just being salty. I'm criticizing his path there. I am salty, but that's besides the point. It's just so odd to me that we're leaning this way. And I think, I hate being this guy, but I feel like it's hurting the sport a little bit. Because you and me on every preview show, I feel like we can't go a preview show without us going, man, what are they doing? Like, this is so odd that they do X, Y, and Z and things. But maybe it's easy to criticize from the outside. So,
and I will say as well, like the new generation of sort of like MMA heels. Like, there has always been bad guys and talkers in the sport. It's happened for years. Tito was doing it 2 decades ago. But I always felt there was an element of fun. If you're in inverted commas, they love to hear characters. Chael could be really funny. Connor, in his rise up the rankings, was hilarious. And I feel like
he's very funny.
Like these days, we don't even have fun heels. We just have guys who are trying to wind people up.
Yeah. I mean, I think Strickland's funny because I've graduated with people just like him. It's like, oh my God, like kind of thing. But I'm the only person that probably finds him funny. Other people get very upset with him for very good reasons, I will say. Henry Cejudo is cringy fun, but he's not really a heel. He's too good and respected, because like he's the man. Like, it's a shtick you're doing. Like, you're awesome. You don't need to do this, but I'm glad you're doing it, I guess. It's kind of the vibe with him. But like Sean O'Malley just comes across as like a very ignorant and self-absorbed man, and it's really cringy. And then there's like Patty I brought up. Patty seems very self-delusional and very and it winds people up. That annoys us. Like we've had talkers in the past. Tito Ortiz was one of the first good talkers in the sport, which shows you how far we've come.
Shows you the dangers of CTE as well.
I hate that aspect of it, but I will give him credit though. Had one of the best debuts in professional wrestling.
The August the first warning.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson's facial reaction is hilarious. Just the contrast of that face and the crowd having no opinion whatsoever.
Just dead silence, dude. The Tito Ortiz pop, man.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Also, word of advice as well before we move on to the next subject. If you get the chance, watch the Impact Wrestling promo. Because Tito was going to fight Rampage in Bellator, and they cross-promoted on TNA. And they have an in-ring sort of promo between each other, and on the microphones I'm going to kick your heart in and all that sort of stuff. It's the funniest thing.
I'll add it even more. Look at Tito's facial reactions when they reveal Justin McCauley. Seven Bonner reveals Justin McCauley in Bellator. His face, he looks like he's so into it, and it's just the cringiest, awfulest thing I've ever seen. And it's priceless.
We'll try and get ourselves back on track here and actually talk about a pay-per-view main event, which sort of shows we'd rather talk about Tito Ortiz and Bellator than we would about this fight.
and
So
complain about counterculture matchmaking. So
yes. We,
yeah,
we are we are much older. Like I'm 34, and I feel like I'm 50 just complaining about these young kids.
I'm 29, and man, I complain about young kids every day of my life.
So
Um,
I think it's safe to say that a lot of people aren't giving Sean Strickland much of a chance here. You look at the bookmakers' odds, it says a lot, but a lot of people are expecting an Adesanya win and a comfortable one at that. Is there any part of Sean Strickland's arsenal that makes you think he could have an opportunity to make this a little bit closer than people think?
Not one weapon, but two weapons if used to work one, use one to work the other, and vice versa. And that's if he mixes his wrestling in with his boxing. I think if he's constantly jabbing, because he's a very much a volume boxer, right? If he's constantly jabbing, hopefully not getting hit with counters, constantly jabbing, putting the pressure, forcing Izzy to back up, because it's really hard to kick off your back foot and make Izzy trade hands with you. When as soon as Izzy starts to like really sit down on his punches, you drop, change levels, and try and mix things in that way. You, in theory, you could kind of control the fight that way. That's easier said than done against Izzy, who's very good. But in theory, you could win the fight that way. Um, I think he hasn't done that in forever. He's so content with just boxing and letting it rip like that. And I think if he really mixed in his wrestling acumen that he has with his boxing, I think we could. I think he would level up from it, admittingly.
I've got a stat here about Sean Strickland because you mentioned the lack of willingness to grapple these days.
Mm.
I've just got the note here. In his past 12 fights, Sean Strickland has gone for 9 takedown attempts. 6 of those came against Uriah Hall. And this was a guy who
Well, that
came
makes
from a
sense.
grappling base early in his career. He
Yeah.
was like an out-and-out wrestler.
Yeah, that's wild. Just so he fell in love with his hands, you know. And I'm not saying anything bad about his hands, like, but come on, kind of thing. It, it's it's time for him to. I think he needs to mix and match these.
Yeah. I do think he's going to be all pressure when it comes to Adesanya, and that is something which I would be interested in. But one of Izzy's big strengths has been his counterattacks. And
Mm.
I can see a situation where Strickland tries to press him up against the fence, and Adesanya manages to get that counter and drop him and finish him on the ground.
Finish him off. That's how you
Yeah,
finish Pajeda.
that's how he finished Pereira. And like
Yeah.
Izzy was willing to do that against a guy who we know carries a ton of power.
Yeah.
Against Sean Strickland, who's known as quite pillow fisted, he's had a
Pivot
reputation
hands.
for not being able to
Yeah.
finish people. It on paper it's going to be a disaster, but we've seen plenty of shocking things in the sport, and Izzy can't get complacent. I don't think any champion can ever be complacent and think that a title fight, like we mock Sean Strickland, we've mocked the
Yeah.
idea of him fighting for this belt, but he's still a guy who's in the top 5 or top 6 of the UFC, and he's been given this opportunity. And some fighters rise to the occasion. They might not deserve the opportunity, but they take full advantage of it. Like TJ Dillashaw versus Brown. No one thought Dillashaw deserved that fight and thought he was going to win. And we saw one of the biggest upsets of all time.
I saw it live, and I will never forget that moment. That overhand right in the first round landed. Just stunning performance and upset like that. Unbelievable. So you never know. Things happen. A lot of people didn't say Rob had a chance to win the second Izzy fight, and look at it now.
That's your Pena at
Always goes back to
269,
it.
isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. That's my. I'm always gonna bring that one up. It's always gonna come back around if this guy's fighting. You know that and wine mom boxing. That one's always really funny to me.
Yes.
It beat the women's goat. That's all I'm saying. Like I
But,
don't know how. It did though.
but Pena never fought Ronda.
Oh, but Ronda fought. Ronda fought. I can't bring that card up because we're not allowed to talk about it here. I just realized that. I like my job security. Oh. Uh, well, stranger things have happened in the cage. We
Yes.
have seen Francis Ngannou turn into a Division One All American. We have seen, um, Mark Hunt and Bigfoot Silva go 25 minutes of war back and forth when a lot of people thought it would be a first round win or an early finish for Mark Hunt. We've seen craziness. So you never know. Like
Yeah.
I'm never. You can never say 100% someone's going to win because you could end up looking like me who almost said 100% on Rob beating DDP. I thought that was the closest thing to a surefire bet. And I looked really stupid. But then, last pay per view, I will say, you and me both picked Aljamain Sterling, but we both called it exactly what would happen if he did, or how he would lose if he did. We
Yeah,
called it exactly.
I think my words were, I said, my gut says O'Malley.
Yeah. We said he's going to rush in and do something stupid on the feet and leave himself open for a right hand. And we called it. I'm not saying we're prophets or anything, but there is a reason this light is shining down so perfectly. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
We'll start
Okay.
we'll start sort of winding things up a little bit here. So you mentioned some of them there. We've had
Mm.
Matt Serra beating GSP, Juliana Pena becoming champion, Dillashaw beating Barao. Where would a Sean Strickland title win rank among the biggest UFC upsets?
I think above Pena, but under GSP Sarah because that's still the craziest one ever to me. If you like, in hindsight, but you have to look at it at the time, right? At the time it happened, because Matt Serra had a pretty good career after he dropped the belt back to GSP. Still had a pretty decent little career, but before that, you know, he lost like to BJ Penn, was a lightweight, so he wasn't even fighting at his original weight class. He had to move up. He's 5'6". He's my height, and like it just so that one's still that's the greatest upset of all time to me. But I think I would put that above. I think I'd put it above. Actually, I don't know. Maybe it's third because I think Pena Nunes. I still think about it now, and I just go, really?
That's probably because of me bringing it up every single day.
That's fair. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. He doesn't bring it up that often. I just think about it sometimes when I'm depressed. No, I'm kidding. No, it's like that one's a wild one too. That's got to be number two. I don't think anything will ever top GSP Matt Serra. I think the only way that could happen is hypothetically John Jones, Stipe Miocic. I think the only way that would like surprise me more is if Stipe came out through a teep kick and a double leg and won the fight that way. I think that's probably the only way I'd be surprised more. But I don't. I actually don't know. I think this would be third all time upset wise for me.
Are you picking Adesanya to win this one? How do you think it's going to happen and when?
I think by decision, I think he lacks that killer itch to like really let it rip. If he like really let it rip, like it's like Tim Sylvia. Tim Sylvia was finishing guys on his way to the title, and Izzy was finishing guys on his way up the ranks. Um, I think that he definitely can let it rip. It's just kind of he's content with just chilling. And I think he's gonna just pick him apart for a while. And I don't think Strickland has the power to really put on the pressure. I think the reason Pereira was able to put and have success putting pressure on him at times was the power, of course, of Pereira. Pereira is the hardest hitter, pound for pound in the sport, probably. And Sean doesn't have that power. It's got to be a lot of volume, and Izzy's not like super hittable. Like he's very good defensively with his head movement and counter striking. That he could, it could be a lot of Sean running headfirst into brick walls all night. But I don't know if he'll finish him necessarily. I'm going to go Izzy by decision. I'm very comfortable saying that.
I'm going to say Izzy by decision as well. I think it's going to be 50-45, maybe 149-46. Just that forward pressure might convince one of the judges to give Strickland one of the rounds.
It's going to be the judge that scored it for Cheeto in the Sandhagen fight, right?
Probably, yeah. The athletic commissions just keep hiring the same people despite all the mistakes they make. So yeah, I think Adesanya is going to win this one. It's going to be fairly comfortable, and you'd presume if Adesanya was to get by this one, it's going to be DDP next.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Because that fight, obviously, I don't want to spoil my opinions of that matchup, but that fight's interesting to me because DDP is the best awful fighter I've ever seen. That's how I would say it, because he does not, like, his style and how he fights, if you watch him, like, just take him out of it. Like, fighter A, fighter B, like those animations you see on Twitter, it's like, oh, this guy looks awful. This guy's number one contender, but he wins and finishes people. So I wonder if he's just going to use that funky style all the way to the top. Like, it's kind of interesting.
Like, what's the TV trope comment? Crouching moron, hidden badass.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Homer Simpson. You know, kind of. I feel like he falls in that category. He had a heavyweight title shot.
He did.
Mm-hmm. It was disqualification too. He didn't technically.
He didn't technically lose. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He could be the baddest man on the planet. Don't look at the stats for that fight against Diedrich Tatum, though.
No. One punch thrown from Simpson, and it was a miss.
I think he only threw like 40 punches his whole career, but he had that like Rocky Marciano power. It's a fantastic episode.
It is. I'm going to go watch it after the show's over. And I want to say thank you so much for tuning into 2 hours of us withering on trying not to talk about UFC 293. We do appreciate your patience for doing so. And we do have people who actually do listen to the entire show. So a big thank you if you are one of those. It certainly helps out the analytics. Before we wrap things up though, we're going to try and do a little bit of spring cleaning here. So Joe, we're hoping to have not one but 2 retro reviews out because we were a little bit behind trying to get our WEC out for September, but we have got one which is planned. Now, middleweight title's going to be on the line. It's quite appropriate. We're talking about a great middleweight champion. We're covering an Anderson Silva card. Which one will it be?
It's going to be, I was hoping for 134, I believe, but we got UFC 126, which is the infamous, not infamous really, it's just famous, not infamous, the famous front kick to the face that Steven Seagal taught him.
I've got the feeling most people chose that card because of the front kick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything disparaging or against their fans, but I feel like what typically wins is the moments and highlights of a card. They don't choose the card for the whole shebang. They choose it for the moment of the main event, and which is understandable. I think that's the more I've kind of thought about that. That's very understandable. That said, this card isn't or 134 is a fantastic card that I wish won, is what I'll say. 126 though, I mean, that moment's so iconic. I mean, I definitely understand why you want to see me react and freak out over to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the amount of artwork I've seen of that moment. I can certainly understand why it was chosen. I personally wanted 134 as well, but I'm not going to fault the public. The customer is always right, as it were.
Yeah, and the customer loves me a lot. Did I mention that?
Yes.
Yeah, but 126. It's also the cover for not even my favorite. We all know it's subjectively, if you know, objectively the best UFC video game of all time. Yeah, made by the guys who did the really awesome WWE games back in the day.
And also, and speaking of people who love you, Joe, they'll also get the chance to see you again on the post-fight reaction, which should be online right now. You'll be talking about Fight Night Paris, which is Garn versus Spivak. Either talking about Cyril returning to winning ways, or potentially a new contender in the heavyweight division. Yeah,
and if you watch the whole podcast, you would know that Karl has covered one base and I've covered the other, so we're both right. No matter what happens in this recording. Yeah.
Yep. And And on that cheery note, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in for like this nearly 2 hours of us rambling on about nothing. This has been the INC. My name's been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Joe Neal. We hope you enjoy UFC 293, and we'll be back a little bit earlier than you expect, because for the first time we are going to be covering a UFC fight night. The women's flyweight title is on the line. Will it be vengeance or vindication as Alexa Grasso takes on Valentina Shevchenko? This is the INC. Thank you for watching.